In ancient Roman times, time was kept during each month using 3 key days: the calends, the nones, and the Ides.
And the Ides fell in the middle of each month, either on the 13th or the 15th, depending on which month it was.
Here in interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary engineering, we pride ourselves on being versatile in our talents and strive to understand the core principles of engineering.
Anyone that graduates as an IDES or MDE major can end up as a doctor, lawyer, acoustician, in management, manufacturing, or any other technical profession you could imagine.
Like the Ides in the Roman calendar, IDES and MDE students fall in the center of the world of engineering.
We can do anything and everything.
So I'm Zach.
And I'm Oscar.
And this is the Ides of Engineering. Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us again on this episode of the Ides of Engineering. Today's guest is Mark Shambaugh, an alum of the IDE program who graduated in 1976. We spoke to Mark in the Nest, the gathering place and study area for current MDE and IDS students in Armstrong Hall. Mark's extensive career in the construction and engineering services industry came to a close just a few short years ago when he stepped down from his position of CEO of Shambaugh & Sons, a construction engineering services company specializing in the design-build philosophy. We discussed this philosophy and how it has been pivotal in their success, as well as Mark's personal journey through this industry. Mark also reflected on his time at Purdue and how IDE helped to tailor his degree to match his career aspirations, as well as sharing some great insights into the program's past and how this program can continue to both prepare students while also allowing them to explore their passions. So thanks again for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed the episode.
Thank you for being with us today. Nice. How are you enjoying your time at Purdue?
I really enjoyed it. I had a very fruitful first day, and today is the second day. I taught a class yesterday, and got to meet with some department heads and a lot of students, and so I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. You taught a class?
Yes.
What class was it? Do you remember?
Design Build Construction over in the CEM school, and a lot of good questions from the students, and I tried to relate a lot of real life experience and best practices, lessons learned, and they were very receptive. In fact, they stayed after.
Wow.
On a 5:45 class. They stayed till 6.
Wow. Jeez. Sound captivating. That's awesome.
It was fun.
Very nice. But so I guess we want to start learning a bit about your industry experience and your background. You spent pretty much all of your career with Shambaugh & Son, right?
40 years.
40 years, wow. Can you reflect a bit on your career with that, and like in terms of your roles and what your current role with the company is?
Well, I started out as a field laborer, a grunt, if you will, doing all the jobs nobody else wanted to do. A lot of hard work in high school and in college, which helped me pay for my tuition as a laborer every summer. And then once I got out of Purdue, I was in engineering, and then estimating and project management, the 3 main phases in any construction office. Then I took over several areas of the company, and then I took over the marketing and financial part as soon as I finished post-engineering, my MBA at that other school that we won't talk about, down in Bloomington. And then became president and CEO, and I retired actually 2 years ago.
Oh, cool. Nice. So what's your current role with the company?
My current role is really just doing some training and recruiting now at Purdue, for which we've had some distance come between our company and recruiting. We used to have 5 or 6 interns this summer, and we want to replenish that and reconnect, and that's what I'm here to do.
Very cool. So out of all those roles you had over the course of your career, which one was your favorite? If you could pick one.
Well, I guess I'm a person that likes to drive the bus, so probably the last 20 years. I was president and CEO, but I have fond memories of all the roles and of course stories from engineering to project management to marketing, to every role that I had that stimulated me. But I guess the last 20 years directing strategically where we were going and getting to meet so many people in the industry, as well as growing our company, increasing about 700% in the last 10 years, was most gratifying.
Wow.
Very cool.
And so, with that time as being CEO, because you majored in engineering before you got your MBA, obviously, were you still able to do a lot of engineering work as a CEO, or is it more project management and delegation and things like that?
We had 400 office people and 2,000 people in the
Wow.
field of our construction company. So my engineering days lasted for 5 years,
Wow.
and that was the end. However, I got involved, even as CEO, with many larger projects, as we called it, the project executive role, that would be up front defining with our design, build, delivery the scope, working with the owner for 10 to 12 weeks in a row. And my engineering was invaluable, because in that 10 to 12 weeks where we're doing preliminary design on any type of structure, a processing plant, a hospital, whatever, at least I was savvy enough with some of my previous projects in engineering from Purdue knowledge to ask the right questions of why not this system, why not that, so we could give the optimum best value solution for our owners, our clients.
Yeah, of course. And so you feel like, do you think that you were kind of informed in a different way from a lot of CEOs and higher ups in companies than maybe somebody who hadn't had that engineering background?
In our industry, there were people more with the construction background than there were from engineering. And of course, here I got both engineering and a construction education, the combined. So it was invaluable all the way to the end, even when you're interviewing people. If you understand, if it's an engineer, the engineering concepts and have that education, not only can you ask the right questions, but they figure out that maybe this is a place you want to come to work if you've got somebody that's not just an administrative person managing a company.
Very cool. And so you kind of touched on it already, but you talked about the design build style of construction that your company does. Somebody who studies sound, I'm not familiar with this, but it sounds really interesting to me. So could you talk about it more?
Sure. Well, I'll try to make it short, and then if you want to talk longer, because it's a long story, it's a 3-day story, and I teach a 3-day design build class.
Wow.
Around the country. But design build actually started with the pyramids, and there was the term called the master builder, who was one source, one contract to build this pyramid. And then from 82 to 2014, it grew from about $500 billion of construction up to that, from probably 30 billion in the 80s, as far as a choice of owners among about 4 or 5 choices on how to deliver a project. Design build is a single source contract with one integrated builder who does both the design and the construction for the project, versus traditionally, owner might, like Purdue, hire an AE firm, architectural engineering firm, and then have a second contract with a builder, and all kinds of things can go wrong and finger pointing in between, but I'll leave it at that. So that was our modus operandi, because we save 20 to 30% in time on projects, and it's been validated by many national studies to be 4 to 6% less expensive. And the more complex, the more innovation involved, design build seems to suit owners for the delivery method of choice.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, and like you said, that's not really the traditional way to do it. And so how difficult is it finding people that philosophy suits, because I feel like most people aren't necessarily trained to have that type of attitude or that approach to design?
Well, I'll cover that in 2 fronts. First of all, you're right. It is hard to find people that understand design build. That's why I'm here at Purdue, who has just launched, at my urging 5 years ago, it's just got launched 2 years ago, their first design build course. to try to give the students background in different delivery methods, including design build, and actually primarily design build in this course. But it's also, since it's, as you said, not traditional, it's somewhat foreign to many owners, public and private, to use the design build method of delivery. But right now, design build is the method of choice for just over 50% of all projects in the United States.
Oh, really?
So it's really no longer, in the last 10 years, it's almost the new normal.
Okay. Very cool.
And so when that was first, it seemed, would you say that Shambaugh was kind of pioneering in that sense? Were you guys kind of early on in that trend of design build?
Well, when I got out of Purdue in '76, we did very few design build projects. And by the time I moved out of engineering and construction, we were doing maybe 20% of our projects by design build, but today 80% of our projects were design build. As far as being any pioneer, there were a lot of people that came before me that sowed those seeds, I think, for design build, and I call it design build done right. But I had such an interest in design build when I saw the results were better for owners that I was one of the early charter members of what's called the Design Build Institute of America, based in Washington, D.C., which is the recognized center of expertise. They publish best practices, research, contracts, tools, if you will, for people to do design build, right? And I was on their board for 6 years and chairman, and later helped co-author and then lead testimony for legalizing with Mitch Daniels when he was governor, the legalization, because it was illegal in Indiana, of design build for public projects like Purdue buildings.
Huh. Why was it illegal before?
Great question. Out of 50 states, it was legal in 45 states, but I tell people that in Indiana, time stands still sometimes, including when we didn't used to move our clocks. But now Arizona's the only school or only state that doesn't change their time. But President Daniels was very helpful with getting us over the goal line, so to speak, with legalizing that in 2005.
Interesting.
Not that long ago.
Wow. Yeah. So so you talked a bit about, or we've been talking about the design build philosophy, and on the website of Shambaugh & Son, it talks a lot about the huge variety of clients that you guys deal with, and how difficult is it to design for such a wide variety of clients when some are in the medical industry, or some will be industry or commercial, or the huge variety of clients that you guys have?
Great question. Many engineers and construction companies only do one type of construction, so they recruit people that know how to design one type of building structure and its according utilities. With our company, we have a stable of people that are divided into groups: a food process team, a healthcare team, maybe institutional and schools team that specialize in designing for those facilities only. There's not a lot of crossover because technology is changing, the needs are changing. It's hard enough to keep up in one field, but if you try to keep up across industrial, commercial, institutional markets and process markets, it would be very difficult to master all.
Sure. Cool.
So kind of building off of this whole design build thing, you guys have been open for almost 100 years at this point. Is that kind of like changing and staying relevant with these sorts of things? Is that important to your company, or how have you stayed open for 100 years? Because that seems to be more or less and less common these days.
I think since we're in the Neil Armstrong building, I'll use the term, it's mission critical to stay relevant.
Yeah.
And I think that we have been able to do that and be a leader by staying at the cutting edge of technology, whether it's 3D modeling tools in the engineering phase, the prefabrication, the design build innovation, and even some construction innovation that keeps us relevant. And because you only have to answer one question to an owner, and when you're on a project, and what have you done for me today? And forget your past history and successes. It's about today. And if you're not staying relevant, you're going backwards.
Yeah. That's one thing that I feel has really been emphasized in a lot of our classes at Purdue is that your education doesn't end with Purdue at all. Is that if you stop doing continuing education and other things like that and learning about the industry after you graduate, your degree will be worthless in 5 years.
Absolutely, and to follow up on that, I'm a licensed professional engineer in 40 states, and I'm design build. There's a certification called Design Build Certified, and both of those disciplines, engineering and the Design Build Institute of America, require at least 12 CEUs in continuing your education every year. So you're really forced to stay current and relevant whether you want to or not, let alone the reading of periodicals and industry magazines, etc.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And so we've talked a lot about the design build philosophy, and I guess what does design mean to you? Because that's something that we talk a lot about in our classes in interdisciplinary engineering, and that's a big question. So
design goes a lot further, and this is one of the, I don't know if it's a surprise or not. Once I got out of Purdue, I thought, okay, engineering-wise, I'm all ready to go, except for maybe experience. But design is so much beyond the calculations. It's looking at, let's say there are 3 ways to design, for instance, some building mechanical system, choices. It's about evaluating those choices, not just designing it one way, the best way. And then there's this magic word that enters into every customer's, every client's, every building owner's mind. That's cost. And so what's the cost of each system? So you have to be prepared to give a variety of system choices with respect to energy, life cycle, and first cost that an owner can select from to get their best value to them, what they think the best value is. And that's probably one thing at Purdue that I found I wasn't as equipped for. And I mean, it's hard for kids to graduate in 4 years as it is, but if there could be more education with respect to, costing and the obligation of an engineer to look at multiple choices versus I think I graduated thinking, wow, I know what the best system would be to design for all these owners across the board. That's not the way it is in reality. It might happen that way, but more often you have to deliver choices and have a collaborative best value discussion.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so you talked a bit about your time at Purdue. What was your experience like at Purdue? Because the interdisciplinary engineering major wasn't quite as, I guess, like we all know each other and things. And it's kind of what I've heard about from past alumni is that it wasn't quite as, there wasn't as much of a community, I guess.
Well, it had just started, and I didn't even know how to spell it. But I came to Purdue pretty much knowing, after working in the field in our construction company in the summers and an opportunity anyway to join the company, that I knew what my career was, which is different than probably 50% of students. But so I found Dr. Grace in interdisciplinary engineering because I had started out majoring in mechanical engineering. And I realized I was going to miss all the construction education by being a mechanical engineer. And so I forgot who turned me, I think our mechanical engineering professor turned me on to that school and some new flexibility. She said there was no real community yet. And basically Dr. Grace, who headed the school, IDES, Interdisciplinary Engineering, IDE at the time, helped me craft, before construction engineering was even there, where you can combine disciplines today, helped me craft my plan educationally and for my career by majoring in mechanical engineering, but going over to the civil school and taking 5 or 6 of those courses, I think it constituted a minor in those days, and combining the best of both schools to tailor make my education to the career that I was going to choose.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's really cool to hear because, when we had Professor Pilot, the current director of the program, on the podcast, she said that she really loves that in the major it's usually a student who wants to combine engineering with something else. So for Zach and I, it's been we want to combine music with engineering, and that's how we found acoustical engineering. And there's theater engineers who obviously want to combine theater with engineering. And it's great to hear that that was kind of the attitude that you guys had even back when the program was just starting out, and that's kind of stayed true throughout the entire history of the program.
And I think it's great that it started that way, and I'm glad to hear it still resonates with me that that creativity option, probably more than any other school, is present in IDE.
Yeah. And so what was it like developing your own plan of study? Was it stressful? Was it difficult? Or was it something that you were excited about?
Well, I don't think it was actually that difficult because, and I had, like I said, had help from the Dr. Grace, the head of the school, and I'd go to the ME school, which I was already in, and look through the curriculum of those things I really needed to be successful engineering-wise, and then went over to the construction school and looked through their classes and basically hand-selected those things that I knew would be helpful to me, and it was fairly obvious which, costing and scheduling and project controls, and of course in the engineering side, it was fairly obvious which classes were most valuable, and so there was really no resistance or roadblocks with the help of interdisciplinary engineering to put them together in my curriculum, and I think I ended up taking a few more hours than needed to graduate just because I wanted to get a jump start a little bit in management courses at Cranard on my MBA, but I did graduate in 4 years.
Nice.
Cool. So what did your parents say about when you decided to go into this kind of like newfound major?
Well, my mother went to IU, so she was confused about Purdue courses anyway, so she didn't ask any questions. My father was an ME here and came during the war, where the first, I'll make this brief, the first 2 years started out in engineering, and then all of a sudden Pearl Harbor, and he took 2 years off and had 37 missions as a B-17 bomber pilot, got shot down, and lots of stories.
Wow.
And then came back to try to pick up on multivariate calculus, where he left off from integral and differential calculus. 2 years later, many lives lost, hard to focus. So he was the most interested and said, well, mechanical engineering, he said, been there, done that. He says, you mean Purdue will allow you to combine and integrate different disciplines and still graduate in 4 years? And so he was very excited when, and I had a couple of his professors from World War II when I was here in 72 through 76 that he respected, and he came down one time and we even talked through the program, and he left so excited and wishing he had had that opportunity in 45 and 44, which of course Purdue didn't have till IDE was founded in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
And that same thing's kind of happened with me. A few of my teachers from my high school went to Purdue, and they majored in engineering, and they both of them said that they would wish they had majored in acoustical engineering when they had been at Purdue, which is really funny. But yeah,
Good.
So I think it's cool that it is something that attracts people a lot.
Yeah. I think one question I had is, so when you were starting to build out your schedule, how hard was there like a lot of pushback from the administration in the beginning days of IDE? Because that's something we have still now, is that it's more of an electronic system now, just like does not know what to do with us. So that's kind of a problem with technology, but I was wondering if there's actual pushback at the time where people were saying you couldn't do this or you couldn't do that.
Well, we had no cell phones. We still had slide rules, so there was no technology roadblock. But I think my recall is that the school was smaller, and Dr. Grace, I don't recall how many people were in the school in those days, but probably less than 100. And so he ran that interference for me in talking to some of the other schools here at Purdue, and really helped me put the schedule together. So I don't recall resistance or roadblocks.
Yeah.
But it was the pioneering days, and I think since the school was smaller, it probably didn't get as much attention or scrutiny maybe from other people, but maybe I slid under the radar, however you want to phrase it. It was a great experience.
That's awesome. And you've talked a bit about Dr. Grace already and the influence that he had. He was the former director at when you were at school. And could you talk a bit more about your experience with him and what it was like having him as the director?
It was a very cozy, almost father-son relationship.
Mm-hmm.
He was 8 years younger than my father, but a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, and today with a larger school, that might be an unrealistic expectation, but in those early days, he had the time or took the time or saw, I mean, I was the first one that tried to combine these particular disciplines. Sounds like some of you are paving new pathways yourselves. And so that was the relationship, and he followed up with me probably 3 or 4 times a year. I would sit with him. I don't even think the school had a counselor in those days. It was pretty bare bones. So I think I was lucky to have that opportunity of direct connect with the director, and so I'm forever grateful.
Yeah, and especially at such a big school like Purdue, you know, most people that I talk to don't even know the names of the director of their program, you know, and because we have, Zach and I think pretty much every student in MD and IDES has a great relationship with the director, with Professor P, and that's really cool that that's always seemed to have been a staple of the major, you know. How would you summarize your time at Purdue, and I guess how do you think it's influenced your current career? Do you think it's prepared you well for being a CEO and for being in the industry for so long?
It's probably a multi-point answer, but I think it was a great foundation, obviously, and the combination of engineering and construction, when that's the field I was going into. I think that learning to work with project teams, whether it's a lab partner or partners, or in the fraternity house for a couple years, helped me with collaboration skills and reaching team goals, not just mine. I think what I knew that I was missing, that I could have gotten here at Purdue if I'd gone to grad school, but I was already immersed in the business, was probably the business sense inside of the business, business financial. And that's why I did the night school MBA routine in Fort Wayne at IPFW through Indiana University and got my MBA because I was, and I think this is the exciting part out of it, when you get out in your career and you've learned what you're learning, and let's just say from the engineering schools, and you're out there, then all of a sudden you find yourself searching for answers to certain problems, or even like in my company, financial controls were almost non-existent. Our information systems were very, I'll just call it caveman in those early days. And remember, the fax machine hadn't even been invented until late 90s. So I had to go back and get that business supplement, so to speak, but there would have been no better foundation for what I did than going through the interdisciplinary school and the curriculum that we put together.
That's awesome. You've obviously had a massive career in engineering. You know, you've been in construction engineering for over 40 years, like you said. And you've talked a bit about how there's so many different disciplines and so many different areas of specializing in just construction engineering. How have you seen engineering evolve over that period of time, and what have you learned about just the practice of engineering as a whole from that time?
Well, I think the changes in engineering were, of course, number one, technology. The engineering tools that we use to actually design the systems and communicate them to the field construction workers, whereas industry changing is when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon with respect to the aerospace industry. I think also the tools that we use to not only design but construct systems within a building changed radically over my career, and for the better. And I think the third thing that stands out among probably many things would be the change with the industry acceptance of design, build, delivery caused a change, and there's a whole 2-day seminar on this, making the mental shift, of our engineers and our team members working with an owner to put together all disciplines of construction up front, early on, and help with the design in more of an integrated, collaborative sense versus, as I said at the beginning, an architectural engineering team over here hiding in their role for 6 months and then turning it over to a constructor who missed all those conversations, all those opportunities to integrate and collaborate and brainstorm better, faster, cheaper design for owners. So that creates a need for much more communication skills than the engineers who used to hide off to the side and then just do nothing but worry about enforcing their design and their will on the constructor, the poor folks that were installing the job. So I think that changes the engineering, I should say, job to be much more communicative and collaborative.
Yeah.
So those are some of the changes that I've seen.
So would you say that the modern engineer, I guess, is called to have a few more hats and to, expand their skill set and be able to dip their spoon into other
Absolutely. Owners demand it, and you need to focus on that when you're a student and take those kinds of courses that might equip you for that versus just wearing the technical hat, to use your terms, and you'll increase your personal brand equity, your value at your senior interview when you want to get hired.
Definitely. Cool. And so I guess would that be the advice that you would give a recent graduate, or do you have any other advice for a recent graduate going into the industry?
Well, I think, with the advance of social media, I mean, we've all heard this ad nauseum. Can today's students communicate in person and persuasively, face-to-face, with their industry partners, their peers, the client, when they get out of school? So whatever they can do to enhance those skills here at Purdue along the way, I think that's helpful. And then, as you said earlier, to recognize that their education is not finished and continuous improvement is demanded by employers and by especially the opportunities for career advancement, that if you want to advance, you just can't take a blow and say, wow, I got my degree, I'm done, I'm going to work. That is not the case today.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. This was a lot of fun. I feel like I learned a bit. I feel like I'm a bit more prepared to go get a job.
Well, I enjoyed it. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for listening to the Ides of Engineering podcast. Zach and I had a lot of fun talking with Mark about his career and his life at Purdue. We hope you tune in for our next episode, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.